Okay, we will start in a few minutes. I think we are all set, so let's start. Can everybody hear me?
Hear you just fine.
Okay. During the webinar, if you have any question or comment, please type in your question at Q&A or comment at chat in English, please. And no recording, please. Okay. Hello, everyone. We have something special down here at Zoom webinar this evening in Japan, morning in Germany. That is Saitama City Foundation for Business Creation, SFBC, and State of Bavaria Japan office joint project webinar. Thank you for joining us today. Please let me introduce myself. I'm Kato from SFBC. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all for your cooperation, and special thanks to State of Bavaria Japan office. First, we are going to have an opening remarks from Senior Director of SFBC, Mr. Sasaki. Mr. Sasaki, please.
Yes. Can you see me? Okay, can you see me? Okay. Okay, yeah, good morning and good evening, ladies and gentlemen in Germany and Japan. My name is Tetsuya Sasaki of Saitama City Foundation for Business Creation. Welcome to the joint webinar with Saitama State of Bavaria Japan office. Unfortunately, COVID-19 is still widespread not only in Japan and Germany, but also all over the world. But I think we can overcome this difficulty by cooperating together to move forward. Today, Dr. Michael Dowling will make a presentation which is titled Innovative Business Model for Industry 4.0 in the German Mittelstand and the Impact of COVID-19 Crisis. Thank you very much. This is the second session of 4 sessions. Please utilize this opportunity to update your knowledge. It has been about 10 years since Saitama and Bavaria began to start to cooperate in the industrial tie-up. Since then, State of Bavaria Japan office has helped us, and JETRO has also helped us. Last year, Nuremberg City and Saitama City concluded MOU to cooperate in mechatronics, medical device, Industry 4.0, and new energy. So I hope this webinar will make our collaboration stronger and more positive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sasaki. Let's start the webinar now. Innovative business model for Industry 4.0 in the German Mittelstand and the impact of the COVID-19 crisis by Professor Dr. Dowling, Chair, Innovation and Technology Management, Faculty of Business, Economics, Information System and Real Estate, University of Regensburg. Dr. Dowling, would you please start the presentation?
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to virtually be with you in Japan. I hope sometime I can come visit again. I've been to Tokyo a number of times for various activities, and hopefully in 2021 can visit again. As was mentioned, I'm a professor here at the University of Regensburg, which is about an hour north of Munich. And I've been here 24 years. I'm an American, though, as you can probably tell from my accent. I have a German wife, and I studied here in Germany about 40 years ago. But I've been here teaching now at the University of Regensburg for 24 years, teaching technology and innovation management. I also represent today the Münchner Kreis, which means Munich Circle. This is a think tank based in Munich that has for many years cooperated with Japan and Japanese companies and Japanese academics We are a group of about 200 professors worldwide and 150 companies that do various activities on the topic of digital transformation. And the Münchner Kreis has cooperated in the past with Fujitsu and other Japanese companies and have held events in Tokyo. So I hope we can do that again. And last but not least, I'm a member of the National Academy of Science and Engineering of Germany called Acatech. Even though I'm a business professor, I'm not an engineer, I'm a business professor, but there's a few of us that are members of Acatech, and I advise the executive board of Acatech, particularly concerning business in Asia. What I want to talk to you about today is the German Mittelstand. Some of you may be familiar with the German Mittelstand. For those of you who are not, I'm going to introduce what that term means, and I specifically have not translated this term into English because there really isn't a good translation. Mittelstand means kind of medium-sized companies, but it really is a special category of companies that are very, very important to German industry and to Germany's development, certainly going back 100 years, but in particular since World War II. And in my group here, we have been looking at how the Mittelstand, these companies, are increasing their efforts with digitalization and what sorts of things they're doing. And so through research, through some of my doctoral students and other projects, we've been looking the last couple of years in particular at how are German Mittelstand companies introducing Industry 4.0 technologies into their business models. And that's what's the topic, the main topic of this talk is going to be about. At the end, I'll say a little bit, as we all do these days, about what impact the COVID-19 crisis is having. And it's kind of interesting that it may surprise you that some of the impacts are positive and not negative, but I'll get to that at the end of my talk. And I'll try to stick to the hour of presentation, maybe a little less even, and then we have plenty of time to discuss, so you can ask questions either by putting them in the chat function or turning on your camera and asking a question. I think we don't have that many people in here. We could probably do that. To understand the German economy, you really have to understand the importance of the German Mittelstand. 99% of all German firms, depending on how you define them, belong to the Mittelstand. Mittelstand are medium-sized companies that are typically family-owned, very often are not traded on the stock market. Some of them may be corporations and have stock, but a lot of them are not. They are typically family-owned and managed very often by members of the family, which gives these companies a very long-term perspective and allows them to be very innovative. So these are the characteristics that are often described for these type of companies. So they're family-owned, sometimes going back multiple generations. They have a long-term focus to what they do. They invest a lot in their employees. So they have play an important role in education of new employees. The apprenticeship system in Germany is very strong, where school-age children are brought into the workforce early at age 16 and learn technical trades at the same time while going to school part-time. And this is very important in Germany in general, but it's particularly important in the Mittelstand. They tend to be less bureaucratic because they're not that big. We're talking about companies, the definitions change. But for me, a Mittelstand company is anywhere from 500 to maybe 3,000 or 5,000 employees. So that's larger than some definitions. But these are companies that are not huge. We're not talking about Siemens or Bosch or other companies like that. We're talking about smaller companies that are still very, very important. And in particular, we know that these smaller companies are very innovative in terms of what they spend on innovation and in terms of their employees and the new products they bring out. And they tend to be very focused on particular customer needs and often serve niche markets, but globally. Herbert Simon, who was a professor in Germany and is now a consultant, calls these companies hidden champions, because they're not often household names, but in particular niche markets, they often lead globally in terms of market share. And because they're family owned, they are often very closely tied to their regions and do a lot for local things in their regions. I'm going to give you an example of a company called Maschinenfabrik Rheinhausen that has been in the family for over 100 years and is very well connected in the local region and does a lot to help develop universities in the region and schools and all sorts of things. This is some data. The Federal Ministry of Economics and Technology regularly reports about the German Mittelstand. So the data is a little bit old, but it still is about the same even today. That over 99% of all companies you can classify as Mittelstand companies. Because they're smaller, they don't have as many employees that the big ones, but still represent almost 2/3 of all employees, about half of all value added, and almost 1/3 of all sales turnover in the German economy. So they play a very big role given their size, and there's just a lot of these companies. It's even more important in Germany in the manufacturing center. So if you compare these type of countries across Europe, the percentage of Mittelstand companies in the industrial sector is around 20% in Germany compared to France, UK, or the US, where it's less than that. France is a little bit less, UK around 15, and the US around 14%. So the Mittelstand plays an outside role in the economy in general, but in particular in the manufacturing economy. And the examples I'm going to be showing you today are all from manufacturing. This chart shows how innovative these companies are. About half companies in the Mittelstand have brought out new products in the last 2 years. That's a very strong rate to show how innovative they are. And they spend a significant amount of their sales on research and development, given their size. So, in absolute terms, you're not going to find the millions being spent like a Siemens spends, but relative to their size, these companies tend to be very innovative, and the German companies in particular are very innovative. As I mentioned, a German professor named Herbert Simon came up with the designation hidden champions. And these are companies that are in niche markets, but serve worldwide markets. And the federal government collected statistics on these hidden champions, and there really are a lot of these in Germany, much more than in the USA, Japan, or even other European countries like Austria or Italy or France. It's very, very strong tradition here that these Mittelstand companies will be in a niche, and in that niche, they will be globally active around the world. And we'll see some examples of that in a minute. What we're also finding is that these Mittelstand companies are very active now with the new Industry 4.0 technologies, which I'll define for you in more detail in a minute. I'm sure most of you now know that Industry 4.0 is a term that was coined by the German government together with Architect a few years ago, talking about the fourth industrial revolution after steam engines, electricities, computerization, and now the digitalization of industry. And there's a very interesting organization in Germany. It might be interesting for you to take a look at this webpage at some point. It's called the Platform Industry 4.0. And it is a joint government industry, what would I call it? Its association is too far. It's a working group of companies and the government, and they do studies and promote Industry 4.0 technologies in German industry. And they have this great map that you can, it's an interactive map. So if you go on the webpage, you can find this map, and you can actually click on these bubbles, and it will pull up projects that companies are doing all over Germany using Industry 4.0 digitalization technologies, which I'll define in more detail in a minute. And so you can really see there's a cluster of these things in South and Southwestern Germany. This is Bavaria. This is about where I am here. This is Regensburg with 2. A lot in Baden-Württemberg, which is also a strong industrial area. A lot in North Rhine-Westphalia, which is the old traditional coal producing part of Germany, and also some in Berlin and other areas. And what's great about this map is you can do selections on particular industries, and you can also select based on the size of the company. So I did that. I reduced the map with all companies that were less than 5,000 employees. So this one is everybody, and this one is only companies that are less than 5,000 in size. And again, you see a typical distribution, lots and lots of these in southwestern and southern Germany. So this is Stuttgart and Munich, and a lot here in the West, and some still in Berlin. But what this shows, and if you click on these bubbles, you can actually go in and look at individual projects to see what these companies are doing, and the platform keeps it up to date. So it's really interesting to get a good handle on what German companies are doing. Okay, so that was the Mittelstand. The Mittelstand are these very important, medium-sized companies, very innovative, family-owned, long-term perspective. What are these companies doing specifically when it comes to Industry 4.0? Well, in order to understand it, you really have to understand how business models have changed over the last 20 years. When I first came here in 1996, the internet was really taking off. And what we were then looking at was the internet as a business infrastructure. So that's where we first saw e-commerce coming with the growth of companies like Amazon. Also in Germany with online bookstores and online auction houses and all of that sort of thing, the development of open source and the beginnings of digitalization. So the initial stuff in the late 90s was as an infrastructure. In the 2000s, the dominant business models were social media and consumer oriented. So that's where Facebook was created and many of the other social media things that are still around today, the crowdsourcing, crowdfunding ideas, the ability to upload things through YouTube, which was created about this time, and other types of social platforms that were sometimes used for business, but were more consumer oriented. And what we have today, since 2015 or so, is the use of a lot of these technologies now in what's called the Internet of Things. Because basically what has happened is the ability to put devices into other components that are connected to the internet has opened up a whole new world of opportunities to have digitally connected products and allow for all sorts of different new business models based on these products. Things like remote usage monitoring or pay for use or preventive maintenance, which I'll get into in a second. And these technologies there are many of them. This list here are different technology fields that my group here took out of a lot of different sources, from McKinsey to the platform to other academic scholars. And these are the technology areas that are relevant for Industry 4.0. So such things as data computing and high-speed networks, using data through new advanced software and analyzing the data analytics, and using artificial intelligence to analyze data. Very important is the growth of human-machine interaction. So you have interactive robots where people are working together with robots. It used to be that if you had a robot in production, you had to fence it off to keep the robot from killing somebody when they were working. And now we have safety enhanced robots in Japan and in Germany and other places where people can work directly and collaborate with machines much more. And on top of that, you have such things as 3D printing, additive manufacturing that has come in. So when we looked at these technology fields, we then came up with a system for what types of business models are out there, and developed these 6 different types of business models. I don't have time today to go into all of these today, but I want to focus in on the ones that we found are most relevant to the Mittelstand, to the medium-sized companies. I mean, you have such things, of course, as pay for usage, you have development of software, you have new infrastructure, but it's over here are the ones that are most interesting, we found, for the purpose of Mittelstand. Digital refinement of products and services, digital networking through intelligent platforms, and the business models that use data that's now coming out of the production line that we didn't have before, thanks to the Internet of Things. So I'm going to go through these three and show you some examples. I'm going to start with this one. This is kind of a stupid example, but it still shows you the power of it. In Germany, the biggest company for making nuts and bolts and screws and things like this is a company called Wirth. Started after World War II, family owned, still run by the family. And they are Germany's largest suppliers of nuts and bolts to manufacturers. So if I look out my window, about 5 kilometers from here is the BMW Regensburg plant, where they make the 3 and the 1 series cars. And if you go down the assembly line, you will find these kinds of bins where the bolts are put in. And obviously it's a simple product, but you have to have the bolts or you can't make the car. And if this bin goes empty at some point, the assembly line is going to stop. And it used to be you had to have people monitoring this stuff to make sure that the bins were always filled up so the assembly line workers could continue their production. Well, Wirth, a couple of years ago, and you can find this on their webpage, they came up with a very simple system where they put here a camera in the bin. And cameras have gotten small and cheap. And the nice thing about this camera, it's got a sensor in it as well and is connected electronically to the internet. So either using a wireless LAN, or sometimes they use Bluetooth technology. The transmission technology can differ, but there's a built-in camera, and it basically takes the place of a person monitoring this bin. And when the bolts go below a certain level, it automatically reorders through the ERP system. They're ordered automatically to Wirth, that then delivers just in time, and the bins get filled up again. Eventually, you'll probably have robots doing the actual filling, but at this point, a human then gets the report, but it's done monitored automatically. Very simple example, but also very powerful. Another company here in just outside of Regensburg, in a town called Neutraubling. It's right just a little bit beyond the BMW plant here. Typical German Mittelstand. This company is called Kronis. And it was founded in 1951 by a gentleman named Kronzeder, and he just shortened his name to Kronis. And he literally started in his garage making simple machines to put beer into bottles. That was the starting point of the Kronis company. Today, they are a hidden champion. About 60% of all the soft drink and beer in the world is put into the bottles by a Kronis machine. So they make the machines, and now they also will do plastic, not just glass. They started with glass, but have gone to plastic. And they are the leading company worldwide in the US, in Asia, based in Neutraubling. So they sell around the world, but they don't make these machines around the world. The machines are all made here in Neutraubling. So they have employees outside, but it's still, it's kind of beyond really Mittelstand now, but it was a Mittelstand company for many decades, about 3.5 billion in sales worldwide. And their specialty are these machines to put liquid of various sorts into bottles, not into Tetra Pak or other things. Those are competitors. And they have been digitalizing continuously over the last years. So again, it's a simple thing. So this is a piece in one of these machines that puts the liquid into the bottle, and using very simple technology, you can put an RFID tag, which is connected to the internet. You can put a data matrix code, which you can scan and then also get data into the internet. And you can put all sorts of data behind just a piece in their equipment. And what that allows them to do is track the equipment. It also allows them to do things like preventive maintenance. So you can see how old a piece is and replace it before it breaks. And that's a very important thing to do with these kinds of machines, because they are very high speed types of production. And if something like this breaks down, then you have to shut the whole assembly line down until it's fixed again. But these sorts of adding data sensors with parts numbers, with temperature data, with machine data, opens up lots of opportunity for doing things within the company more efficiently. And we'll see by the end of my story that it also opens up opportunities for doing things outside of the company. But I'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, so that was the first example. Digital refinement of products and services, taking things that are already there, adding sensors, adding RFID tags, getting the data off of those things, allowing you perhaps then to do other types of businesses. The next step is once you do that, you can then start to analyze that data that's been collected. And here I want to give you the example from another definitely Mittelstand company that is a hidden champion in its business. This is Maschinenfabrik Rheinhausen, an aerial view of one of their two factories here in Regensburg. And it was founded in 1868 in Regensburg. And they do other things, but their basic product is this thing that you probably have never, a lot of you may have never heard of one of these before. This is a high voltage on-load tap changer. And I'm not an engineer, but I can explain the basics. This piece of equipment basically is put into a transformer and takes high voltage electricity that we take off of a power plant. And when you see the high voltage lines going across the country or buried underground, that comes out of the nuclear power plant or the coal power plant, wherever, at high voltage. And obviously that high voltage has to be reduced so it's not high coming out of the wall. Otherwise your hair dryer or your cell phone charger would explode when you plugged it in. And this is the thing that does that. It reduces the voltage in a controlled way so that the voltage coming out of the wall won't destroy your electrical devices. And they've been making these things since the 1800s and also have 50–60% world market share. There's only a few competitors around and they put them into transformers. So they sell, it's a business to business business, and they sell to transformer makers around the world who ultimately sell into the electrical power grid. And they were one of the first companies in Germany to recognize the potential for Industry 4.0 and was awarded a couple of years ago the first Industry 4.0 award. So what did they do? Oops, I went too fast. This is the traditional manufacturing, how it's done. So, I mean, they had computers, they had a machine park. So these things are made in a machine tooling sense. It's a typical machine manufacturing kind of company. And then it was connected with the warehouse, with quality control, with the ERP system, but there was still a lot of paper involved. Some of them were digital connections. Sometimes pieces of paper were moved from one place to another and data had to be re-entered. It was not really one system, even though a lot of it had digital information. And about 10 years ago, they changed that and started working on that and came up with one computer-based system where all of the data from the machine park, from production controlling, from the tool storehouse, from quality control, gets collected in one central database and can be processed there, and basically took paper completely out of the system. So it's all digital, gathering the data that they were collecting anyway from the individual machines and from all of these things. And it's enabled them to greatly improve their business model. What I mean by that, basically, as a business person, there's two things you can do with a business model. You can either lower your cost to make you more competitive, or you can improve your product or processes to serve your customers better, allowing you to charge potentially a higher price. That's basically it. You either lower your cost or you improve what you're doing so you can maintain or potentially increase prices. And this technology here's the webpage, you can look at their webpage, Rheinhausen, allowed them to do both. For one, it significantly reduced their cost, 32% cost reduction, without really making big investments in things. This was done because the machine park was much more efficient. So you could reduce in the existing machines, 500,000 euros a year with little investment. That's all profit, because there was some cost, but not big costs involved. So most of that was profit. It also allowed them to be faster. The changeover time in moving the tools to make the different parts of the tap changer went down from 7.5 minutes on average to 4.5 minutes. That doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a lot. That's a great efficiency improvement, and that allows them to produce faster and more efficiently, improving their success with the customer. And so these sorts of things can have a big impact. 40% impact is in the manufacturing world significant. Okay, the final one I want to talk to, how am I doing on time? I think I'm doing okay here, is once you get this data internally, you can then start linking that data externally. And that's where your business model then becomes part of a networking of market players. And what we're seeing is the use of these networking tools to take the data that Maschinenfabrik Rheinhausen has and link better with its customers downstream and link upstream with its suppliers. And the way that works is with digital platforms. And we really are seeing a platform revolution. If you haven't read this book, I can recommend it highly. Jeffrey Parker is one of the leading scholars in the US at Dartmouth University, who has been looking at how platforms are changing the world, and not the platforms we usually talk about. Basically, a platform, to give it a definition, says, in the past, we had production systems where you had raw materials coming in, you produced, you assembled, and then you sold. So you had a very straight value chain. And what platforms are doing is creating a third entity that links producers and consumers, and this platform may be outside of the boundaries of your own company. And what we're seeing is that these platform companies in the consumer world are very, very valuable if you do them correctly. And that was the initial use of such platforms. But what we're seeing today are platforms growing in the producing world. And I'm going to show examples of them. But you often see charts like this. Uber, that was founded in 2009, has 7,000 employees and has a higher stock market value than BMW, that has 116,000 employees. Or Airbnb, that's about to go on the stock market. We'll see what their value is once it goes on the stock market in the next few weeks. They're now talking close to 45 billion as a market value. Airbnb is much more valuable than Marriott, with much less employees, and it doesn't actually own any hotel rooms. It's a hotel platform. And of course, these other ones like Instagram, Facebook. But what we're seeing now today is the growth of platforms all around the world, and not just in the social area. We're seeing them in e-commerce, in finance, in media, in education, and global players from Alibaba in China, in the pharmaceutical area, Google, of course. More and more of these are coming up around the world, and these are very valuable companies. This was a chart that was done, if you look back a couple of years ago, who the most valuable platform companies are. Well, in the US, it's Google, that's the Alphabet is the mother company, Apple, Microsoft, et cetera. Most of these focused on consumer platforms. And in Asia, you've had the growth of Tencent and Alibaba, and of course, Samsung. And in Germany, the really one big platform company is SAP, that has actually focused more on business-to-business applications. And what we're finding, and this is in the Parker book that I mentioned, is that the idea of platforms is expanding way beyond consumer industries, to agriculture, to energy, to logistics, to operating systems, to transportation. It's going way beyond what we know of from the Airbnbs and those things of the world. And it's going to transform a lot of these industries, I think for the better in many cases. So you have lots of different kinds of platforms that are growing up. Some of them are platforms for new services. Some of them are platforms to collaborate between companies. Some of them are for innovation. So companies that can interact with competitors or with downstream with their buyers or upstream with their suppliers. And some of them are actual physical network platforms where companies get together and use joint software products to interact with each other. And there's lots and lots of these. I got this chart from SAP. You obviously can't read all of these, but it shows you there are lots and lots of companies that are providing the building blocks and infrastructure. There are a lot that are providing various applications. And then there are lots of what we call verticals, application areas, from personal to home to automobiles to the industrial internet. It's a really exploding area, and there's going to be probably a shakeout in a number of these firms, but still there's a lot going on around the world using platforms for connection. So let me give you some examples. Another interesting, it's not really a Mittelstand company anymore. Trumpf is too large, but it started as a Mittelstand company and got bigger and bigger. It's one of the world's largest companies today in making machine tools that go in to make other things. And they were one of the first companies to recognize this platform idea where they could network their internal data collection from Industry 4.0 technologies outside of the company, and have done that quite well in the last 3-4 years. So this is a chart that we got from Trumpf that kind of shows that. So you have the factory of Trumpf, you know, the classical factory with all the various components. Then you have the machine suppliers that are supplying different machines that go into the machines that they make, sensors, nozzles, all sorts of things. Some of these things are in German. And then, of course, they have their partners that distribute and send the machines to their customers at the end of the day. And they developed a system to link all of these together. So they can put objects and interfaces into all of these parts of the network and link those together in one information system to give Trumpf better information, but also to give their suppliers and their buyers potentially better information using Industry 4.0 technology. And they call this True Connect. So it's all out through all of the production processes. It's tailored to particular customers. It's very modular, so you can build it up. And it's been very useful in helping them reduce management costs and logistic costs at a relatively small investment. You do have to invest in this technology, but the returns are fairly quick for connecting these things together, and has enabled Trumpf, despite lots of international competition, to remain quite competitive in the industries that it is in. So, but it's not just big Mittelstand companies, it's also smaller Mittelstand companies that are taking up this idea. This is a very interesting example that has made a lot in the German press. This is a company called Kreis. It's in northern Germany, in kind of a little town in the east of between the Ruhr area, the industrial heartland, and Berlin. And this very little town has been making agricultural machines like this one. So harvesters, balers, mowers, tractors, and their customers are obviously farmers. And they've been doing this for 100 years. And they're one of Germany's strongest companies in this, but also sell a lot of their agricultural equipment worldwide. And they had an idea to try and link their products better to their customers and also to suppliers that their customers could use through a digital platform. So the idea, and they called it 365 FarmNet, was to develop a digital platform that would link the Kreis product to the farmers and the farmers to other products. And they first tried to develop this internally, but they ran into a human resource problem. To develop this kind of a platform, you need good computer programmers. And it turned out in this little dinky town in North Rhine-Westphalia, they couldn't recruit enough computer programmers to work on this project. And it was not very successful. Someone got the idea, hey, where do we have these high quality people? Not too far away, there are lots of them in Berlin. Berlin is a hub, along with Munich, for lots of startups, lots of good university people coming out. You can find programmers there, international, from Eastern Europe and other places. So they spun off the 365 FarmNet as a separate subsidiary and moved it to Berlin. And then it took off with 50 employees, and it continues. Basically, what they do is they link the Kreis product with its farmers to other service providers. So Bayer AG, which is a supplier of fertilizers and other pesticides, those sorts of things, over this platform, together with Kreis, links to the farmers. A seed company links to the farmers. So they're linking together with other suppliers to their main customers that provides values to the farmers and encourages the farmers to keep purchasing from Kreis. And there's now over 2,000. You can join the network for free. It's what we call a freemium product. For free, you get very basic information. And if you pay something, you get better information. And they now have over 2,000 farmers that are actually paying for this kind of information. It's based on a Microsoft platform. That's the Microsoft Windows logo. So it's run on Microsoft Azure, which is the platform technology that Microsoft provides. There are several of these providers out there today. Of course, Siemens has such a basic technology. And the big one, of course, is Amazon Web Services, which is very big in Germany. A lot of Mittelstand companies are using the technology, putting their services on top of that. And of course, in China, you have Alibaba and other companies doing that. So you can sign up easily and then add on, and many farmers are joining it, and many partners are joining this network. So Allianz is an insurance company that can sell insurance to the farmers. Lots of others, I'm not even sure what all of them do. Here's an app provider, but these are all companies that are using the Kreis generated platform to provide value added to the Kreis customers, and it ties the Kreis customers tighter to them. So it provides a digital ecosystem that they can all use and gives them a lot of benefits. And other competitors have copied this quite quickly. John Deere in the United States, the main manufacturer in the United States of farm equipment, has a similar platform now that provides similar types of activities. And these kinds of things are emerging more and more in the German Mittelstand, not for consumers, but for business to business application. Another interesting one is called ADAMOS, if you're Adaptive Manufacturing Open Solutions. And it is a joint venture from DMG Mori, which is a German-Japanese company, I believe, Software AG, Dürr, Zeiss, and another German company for doing these sorts of things. And they try and bundle together knowledge for mechanical manufacturers, providing a joint platform where these manufacturers can link together. And it has two pillars. It has one, which is an IoT platform. So it provides basically the platform service that for all of the members of this group. And it also has a factory alliance where they try and go into the factories of the customers of this group and implement new apps and other digital services for the customers. So it's growing. It has this platform as a service and infrastructure as a service. You can go on their webpage and see who the latest partners are. And it's, you know, it's like a Facebook for manufacturers, but only for business applications, not for consumer applications. Then let me go back to Kreis AG, because I started this set of description when I started talking about Kreis AG. Kreis is the company here in Neutraubling making the machines to put liquid into bottles. They have recognized that they can use platform technology and have created their own platform called Share to Act. And the idea of this platform is to take the data that they have in their factories and link it to the suppliers and link it to their customers and ultimately to the consumers on one platform. This one runs on Amazon Web Services. So Amazon Web Services provides the infrastructure, and Share to Act they've developed, they have a subsidiary company now called Syskron, Systems for Kreis. And they have 150 programmers now that are working only on this product to make Kreis more efficient internally, but more importantly, link Kreis to its buyers and to its suppliers. Just taking off, and I think they're doing things like smart procurement. They're managing their warehouses better. They're helping the customers that install the machines manage their devices better and can connect to points of sales and all sorts of other things using all the data in one system. And now they're starting to use artificial intelligence technology to analyze a lot of this data that's coming out. Once you have the data and once you have it in such a system, it makes it a lot easier to analyze that data using AI technologies. So this is what they're planning to do. They're starting with connecting. They've connected it to the cloud. Now they're starting to be able to analyze and get better maps of what's going on. And in the end, they want to be able to use AI technology to predict the future and also to make recommendations. This is where you can really do things like predictive maintenance. So you can really predict when a machine needs to have its maintenance done, send out in advance the technicians and not wait till something breaks down and then they have to fly somebody from here to Japan to fix it, because that most of the big technical people are based here in Neutraubing. So what do we conclude? The German Mittelstand is not all, but many of them are taking great advantage of the Industry 4.0. There's still a lot of potential though. Before the COVID crisis, and I'll talk about the COVID crisis to end, before the COVID crisis occurred, it was sometimes difficult to convince German Mittelstand companies to make the investments necessary in Industry 4.0 for the simple reason they were all doing very well. The economy was doing well, and it's often difficult to convince a medium-sized company, make an investment today that will have a payoff 2 or 3 years in advance, when they say back to you, but I'm already selling more than I can almost produce. Why should I worry about that? It's all going fine. But that's changed. That's one of the potential advantages that has come out of the COVID crisis. What we see here is that there are various business models possible, from the very simple, adding sensors and things to existing products, to the very complex, using artificial intelligence to analyze data internally and externally. One of the big problems still, or one of the hindering factors, is talent. It is still difficult, and it's probably going to become even more difficult to get the necessary talent in the locations where you need it. So you saw this example where Klaas had to move to Berlin to get the people that they needed. The guys here in Regensburg, I'm the head of the Syskron company, went to school with my son, and he calls me up regularly. I need more programmers. Do you have any programmers? And we don't have we're about to develop a new computer science program, so maybe there'll be help coming for those people, but they have a hard time just finding people that are willing to work on these things because there's such a demand in the marketplace. Industry 4.0 brings clear benefits, but there are investments required, some small, some big, depends on how far you want to go. And it often is difficult to convince the medium-sized companies to make those investments. What we really see, and what we've been doing in my research organization, the Münchner Kreis, is trying to bring big companies and Mittelstand companies together, because we see a lot of potential where a medium-sized company can partner with the Microsoft, with the AWS, with the Siemens, and collaborate on some of these things, and that will benefit the German economy greatly, especially as a lot of these products are global. And therefore, it's also very important that international standards be pushed, and that with there was 3 or 4 years ago, there was some danger that we were going to have these separate solutions for Industry 4.0. I'm much more optimistic today, because Germany, and in particular Japan, have been the leaders in developing international Industry 4.0 standards that now most of the world is starting to follow. The Chinese have come in, the US is coming in. So I'm optimistic that we're going to have the right kinds of standards that will be necessary. So what about COVID? Well, obviously COVID has had a big impact. The big shutdown in last spring had an impact, and we are seeing now we have in Germany currently a partial lockdown. We might go to a full lockdown again over Christmas, but we are seeing some recovery. But to give you an idea of, I think, what's happening, there's a very interesting study that was done by McKinsey. McKinsey is one of our partners in the Münchner Kreis, The study is in English. Anyone wants a copy, you can find it online. And if you can't find it, send me an email. I'll send you a copy. They did a study this past summer. How is the German Mittelstand, even they use the term in English, mastering the COVID crisis? And they surveyed a bunch of Mittelstand companies in April when we were still in the midst of the spring lockdown. And they tried to get a feeling as to what were they doing. And you can see the distribution here in the States, where mainly the Mittelstand companies are Bavaria, Baden-Württemberg, and North Rhine-Westphalia. And it's hit them. They've had problems. They've had supply chain issues. There have been disruptions, particularly in April when the first wave hit. Came out of those in the summer, and hopefully now we're better prepared for a lot of that. The companies even in April started to resume operations. Some of them never shut down. They were able to work, in limited shifts and things like that. So almost about half were fully operational. Some had to reduce, and they had great things here in Germany with reducing the number of employees, but not having to fire them or lay them off with the way Germany structures that. And they've looked at what impact that's going to have. And interestingly enough, obviously a lot has been decreased in terms of what their expected sales are, but some of them have been seeing increases in certain industries. So it has not hit them as bad as it could have hit them. And we're seeing recoveries around the world. But what's very interesting is that the digital products that the companies were working on have not been reduced significantly. If anything, the German Mittelstand is using the crisis to increase their activities in the digital space, building new business models, optimizing IT infrastructure, improving customer experience. There's an old saying in the US, never waste a good crisis. And sometimes a crisis can help you realize, hey, we need to make investments now because using new digital technology will help us in the future. And it's not just digital meetings like we're doing here with Zoom, but it's all sorts of other interesting activities that they can do. So there are lots of products going on, and they're continuing to pursue these products. So there are negative effects, but McKinsey came to the realization that German enterprises are using the crisis as a good motivator to keep adapting their business models and believe it will help them weather the storm that's still here, but more importantly, recover when hopefully this storm ends for us all with the new vaccines that are coming. And in the end of the day, this crisis may actually help these companies emerge in a stronger position. The World Economic Forum has also been looking at this. They came out with a white paper in May of 2020. You can find this on their website, or I can send you a copy. And they have been looking at how manufacturing companies in general are reacting to the COVID crisis. There are things that have made things difficult in terms of human resources, in terms of systems, in terms of supply chains, but they're also positive that companies are dealing with that in Europe and are beginning to see literally the light at the end of the tunnel. So we're optimistic. It's going to be a long, hard winter for everybody where COVID is still a big problem, but we're optimistic that we're going to come out of it stronger in the new year. And that's it. If you have any questions, please ask him. If you want anything, if you want to copy these slides or something, send me off an email. I'd be happy to interact with you via email or to chat with you now. Christian, how will further digitalization affect the benefits to be physically present in overseas market like the EU? That's a good question. I think we're going to see how that works. I mean, I think we've realized, all of us, that for some things, you don't need to get in a plane and fly to Tokyo. Doing this kind of a webinar, I can give you a lecture just as easily from my office as I can locally. On the other hand, the interaction that happens outside of the formal settings is still going to be very important. So I think you're going to see a return to lots of physical things. especially when you're trying to develop new business, new relationships. When you already know somebody, like when you and I, Christian, want to talk about FC Bayern, we can do that via Zoom. We don't have to physically get together, although it's more fun to get together and do that over a beer in Tokyo at that German pub you showed me. I hope we get to do that again sometime soon. Why are German SMEs so many innovative and global niche companies? That's a good question that has just developed over time in the last 100 years, that German SMEs, these Mittelstand companies, grew up serving a particular niche and focused on those niches, and they were successful in those niches and expanded. Of course, there is a danger to that strategy, because as some technology comes along and changes something, you could be out of business quickly. I work closely with Maschinenfabrik Rheinhausen, and literally they're more or less a one-product company. But in the last 10 years, they've realized the danger of that, and it started to diversify into other businesses through acquisition and through their own development. Because if somebody came along with a digital tap changer, for example, the tap changer is actually a physical product that works mechanically. I don't know that it can be done, but let's just, the thought experiment, somebody comes up with a digital device and Maschinenfabrik Rheinhausen doesn't make it, well, their business is dead. But they're investing in digital technology. So maybe if something like that comes along, they're for it. There's really no secret to it. I think the thing is this family-owned part is a key aspect. They're typically not stock companies, so they're not pressured by the stock market for short-term returns, but they can have longer-term aspects. Maschinenfabrik Rheinhausen is more or less privately held. They do have Siemens as a strategic investor. Siemens owns, I think, 20% of the stock, and 80% is held by family members. So they have Siemens as a member on the board, and they work closely with Maschinenfabrik Rheinhausen, which gives a benefit to both. But they don't have to worry about meeting quarterly analyst projections or that sort of thing. What's your take on the German-French Gaia initiative? Can I give my real opinion on that? I guess I can give my real opinion on that. I personally am skeptical. I mean, I just participated in the German digital Gipfel, the summit meeting with Angela Merkel, and Gaia X, it's called, actually, was a big topic that was started a year ago, and now it's getting further along. I mean, the idea is to create a digital infrastructure like Amazon Web Services, like Microsoft Azure, like Alibaba already has, to compete with these companies. A digital Airbus is often the reference. Well, the Europeans were successful with Airbus. They were successful in getting a European consortium together that competed successfully with Boeing and McDonnell Douglas. But the Europeans also tried to start a digital Facebook and to come up with a European Google, and those initiatives fell flat. One of the problems with Gaia X is we're talking about fundamentally a networking business. And we know from network economics that once network effects take place, it's often very difficult to get customers to switch. So if I set up, this Syscron sets up its platform business on the top of a Amazon Web Services platform, will they switch to a Gaia X just because it's a German company? I'm skeptical that that's going to happen in a big way. On the other hand, it's probably worth the attempt. We'll have to see. Most of Japanese companies are rather afraid of investing for something which cannot guarantee 100% profit. Yeah, that's a problem. Developing platform costs massive and takes long to get the profit in any sense. I don't think the costs are that massive. I would disagree with that. The massive cost is the infrastructure. And AWS supplies that to you. Alibaba will supply you the infrastructure fairly cheap. You have to put a software layer on top of that, but there are now companies offering that as well. And so, yes, you do have to take a risk to get these profits. And I'm certainly not a Japanese expert. Maybe it has to do with the risk-taking profiles of these companies. But I don't think it's a massive cost sense if you don't try and build the infrastructure. Even Siemens, runs parts of its network, its smart factory initiative, on AWS machines. And I was quite surprised by this. And I talked to the head of research for Siemens in Munich, and he said, it's quite simple. I don't need to run a server farm. And Amazon Web Services has big server farms, and they will now guarantee that your data stays in Europe and is conformed to the European data protection laws, and will not transfer the data back and forth to the US or to Asia. And there's no reason why Siemens needs to have the infrastructure. It puts its software on top of that and runs then its platform software for itself and for its business partners. So I don't know whether there are Japanese companies offering that kind of infrastructure. Certainly Alibaba is making big investments in that area. Oh God, what will come after Industry 4.0? If I knew that, I would play the stock market and not be a professor. People have been talking about the biotechnology revolution. I mean, I think that's going to be an important thing. Architect has been working on that. I mean, it's really amazing how we have gone from no vaccine to multiple vaccines in less than 12 months with some technologies that have never been tested before. Or never been used in vaccines before. The BioNTech, which is a German technology, it drives me crazy. I'm an American, and the Americans talk all the time about Pfizer, and the technology is from Germany, from BioNTech, and Pfizer's just making it and distributing it. They didn't make it. And the BioNTech technology, from what I read, I'm not a biotech expert, can be used in lots of other medical applications as well. So the money that's been gone into vaccine development might have big impacts on the medical and biological world. I think that Industry 4.0 will continue, and we'll get more and more advanced robots, more and more advanced artificial intelligence applications that are being put in to the networks. So I'm not sure that there will ever come. I mean, also the other generations, it's not like they disappeared. We built on the ones before. Industry 3.0 is the computerization of things, and they're still there. Industry 4.0 is the networking of those things. If we'll call something in the next 10 years Industry 5.0, I don't know. The Japanese, I believe, like to talk about Society 5.0. We're using a lot of these technologies for social good. I think that's an application as well. Robotic applications in nursing homes or hospitals, other sorts of social implications for these kinds of technologies. I'm a business person, so I focus mainly on the business side of things. But we know there's a lot going on, particularly also in the world of work, digital workplaces. I have a doctoral student who's defending her dissertation in an hour from now, how technologies will change the workplace of the future, and did a whole dissertation, not just on things like this, video conferencing, but in general, how technologies are changing workplaces and allowing collaborative work and all that sorts of things. That's also a different application of digital technologies outside of the factory, but will be very, very important as well. And so I think we'll see that. We'll see that in the education area. Bavaria shut down its schools for the most part yesterday. And my wife is a Berufsschule teacher. That's the vocational high school system, and had to overnight go from standing in front of her class to teaching with, they use Microsoft Teams, which is the competitor product to Zoom, and literally had to overnight switch from physically going into her classroom and digitally going into her classroom yesterday. And it worked just fine all day long. So she's now digitally teaching. We're going to see more and more of that in the future. Anybody else? You're welcome to turn on your camera and ask a question too if you want, so I can see you. Christian, you can too. Yes, Mr. Shinya, you raised your hand. Go ahead. Turn on your camera so I can see you, and turn on your microphone. No, you didn't raise your hand? I thought you raised your hand.
Okay, any other question?
Well, I hope that some of this was interesting and useful.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your great presentation, Dr. Dowling. Okay, so Yamamoto-san, please. Q&A のやつ。Well, if you have any question on this webinar, please send us an email here, or to the Dr. Dowling directly, and then we will get back to you later. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed our webinar. And then, 山本さん、ごめんなさい、もう一個お願いします。Well, and then our next webinar will be webinar 3, 5 p.m. Japan Standard Time, 9 a.m. Central European Time on 17th December 2020. Strategy for mitigating cyber risks, the approach of the security network Munich by Mr. Peter Murig, General Manager.
He's an excellent expert. I know him quite well. He's a very good expert on exactly that topic.
I see. So please register this one for, it's going to be interesting. So, well, thank you again for your time.
Okay, thank you all, and everybody stay healthy. Servus, Christian. And
That was Michael.
I hope we have a chance to meet again sometime in the new year. Would love to come to Tokyo again and to visit your group.
You're welcome anytime. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.